Welcome to Behind the Recipe. I'm your host, Christina Hitchcock. Join me every week as we dive into the joys of cooking, explore kitchen tips and tricks, and share delicious recipes that will inspire your next meal. So whether you're a seasoned cook or just learning your way around the stove, there's something here for everyone. So let's get cooking. Today, we're talking with my friend Giangi Townsend from Giangi's Kitchen about Italian and American cooking. Welcome to the show, Giangi.
Well, thank you so very much, Christina, for having me. It is an honor and a pleasure to be here. So thank you, thank you, thank you. This is going to be fun.
I know. I love talking recipes with you. It's so much fun. But before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Perfect. Well, my name is Giangi Townsend. I'm the face behind Giangi's Kitchen. I am French and Italian. My mom is Italian. My dad is French. Spent my formative years up to my adult years in Europe. So in winter in France, summer in Italy. And yes, I know it's a dream. And my
Oh,
parents had a gelateria too, which was kind of a lot of fun. So gelato's like, oh,
I could hear the music in the background right now as you're telling the story.
exactly. But unfortunately, when you work and you live and you're forced, it's like, "Ugh, do I have to be there?" But I was actually blessed behind the heat to be there. So my recipes are very simple. I'm trying to take the stigma away from the French cooking and make it more friendly, home cook friendly, which let's face it, we have 60 million people in France and they all eat. French cooking is not different. Same thing with Italian cooking. Italian cooking is a little bit more intricate in certain way, but at the end of the day, it's extremely easy. So I'm just having fun with both of them and enjoying and putting out my recipe while we eat. The blog started as a kind of a little joke for my two best friends because every night they were calling and turned out to be a business. Hobby turned into this fabulous business, and I'm blessed to be able to do what I love, photography and cooking and then writing. So
And
in a
sharing
nutshell,
recipes
that's
with the
me.
world. Yeah,
Exactly.
sharing recipes with the world. I love it.
Exactly.
I
My
love it.
nightly dinner came to the world just as a fun little thing to do, a fun little hobby, and it is something that I absolutely look forward to coming to my desk in the morning, look forward to being on my tiny, tiny little kitchen, which is not a trophy kitchen compared to where I lived, and they have 1,000 square feet kitchen. Mine is very tiny, and I love it. Just love it.
Yeah. Well, sometimes the best food comes out of the smallest kitchen. So,
Absolutely. I mean, if
yeah.
you live in Europe, you saw those kitchens, they're like galley kitchens. And I had an aunt, she had a pensione, which is she had 25 people at lunch at 1, 25 at 2 o'clock, and another 20 people at nighttime for dinner. And that was in Italy. And she literally had a kitchen that was half my size.
Oh my goodness.
So you don't need a big kitchen to prepare
No.
to cook a
Nope.
meal.
Nope. Absolutely not. It's
Yep,
all about what goes into it, not what you're surrounded by.
exactly.
So we're talking today about one of my favorite food types, and that's Italian cooking. I'm 50% Italian, 50% Norwegian. So as my father used to joke, I'm half of two meatballs, the Norwegian meatball and the Italian meatball. Um, but it brings like I've always been drawn to Italian cooking. I love the flavors, I love the textures, I love everything that goes into it. I'm a carbaholic, so bring on the pasta, the bread, all that good stuff. But I'm kind of excited to talk with you about the difference between true Italian cooking and the Americanized versions and ways that, if we wanted to make our recipes more authentically Italian, how we can do that and really just picking your brain. So let's dive in.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
So why don't we start by, why don't you tell me a little bit about the basis or the start, not the start, that's not the right word. The basis of Italian cooking. Like, what do you find are like the cornerstones of true Italian cooking?
Well, Italian cooking is an extremely hot heart cooking.
Hmm.
Italy is segmented into regions. There is the north, the center, and the south. All three places are completely three different cooking. All three places have three different climate, but also every little region has their own specialties. So it's kind of hard to compass Italy as a whole. Well, this is an Italian dish because everything is an Italian dish. They have
Right.
thousands of dishes because each little dish may be the same dish just varying depends on the region where you're on. So now, if you go in the north of Italy, there are a lot more soups and creams because there is more of a French influence on their cooking.
Mm.
But on the south, because there is a lot more fish, they are surrounded by, as you know, Italy is surrounded by water. But if you go to Sicily, Calabria, Puglia, Abruzzi, all that part there, they use a lot more fish per se than in northern part of Italy, which is, Lombardia, Piemonte, Val d'Aosta, all the northern part. And I know I talk with my hands, but in my mind, I see it. So please, guys, understand if you're listening to this, like the northern part of Italy, it's more, the little part of the top of the boot of Italy. If you go to the
Yeah.
south, and therefore going on the south, there is a lot more fish, but there's also a lot more tomatoes, a lot more, you know, um, eggplant and zucchini. So their food is a lot more richer into that kind of cooking
Mhm.
versus the northern Italy, which there is rice in Lombardia, which is one of the biggest producer of arborio rice. So you have rice, you have
Mm.
soups, you have that kind of food. Then you have the cheeses because you have the French. And then you got the center, which is lamb heaven. So I spent my summers in Abruzzi, which is if you put a pin in Rome and you go straight ahead and hit the other coast, there is Pescara, the
Mhm.
Abruzzi, which is you go from skiing to the beach, you have fish galore, but you also have lamb, and they eat a lot of lamb there. So, and there is a lot of cheese, there's a lot of goat, there's a lot of milk. So it's kind of like it's really each little area is famous for their own little cooking.
Yeah.
Pasta obviously being the most transcended throughout the whole Italy.
Right.
But the more south you go, you eat more fish. The more north you go, you eat more meat.
Mhm.
Soups are north, south is more pasta in a
Mm.
way.
Oh, I like that. I like that breakdown. And then you have
Yeah, it's kind of
Sicily. You have Sicily in the whole picture too, which is
yeah, oh,
its
Sicily's
own
right there,
little.
and then there's Sardinia, which is a
Yeah.
tiny little island right in the middle of the Mediterranean, which has a lot because it's a very harsh ground. They don't have a lot. They have a lot of fish, but they also have a lot of cheeses, and they have a lot of goat and a lot of muttons and lambs. So it's a little bit of a different cooking. And also,
Mhm.
there is another very important thing you have to understand. Italy has been on and off. They're all families. The road kind of families, and it has been always taken back and forth. So it's between Austria and which has the northern west, no, east side of Italy has more of a Germanic influence on
Mhm.
their cooking. And then you put Piemonte, Liguria, which has more of a French because that kept going back and forth with Napoleon. So there is so much influence in all their
Yeah.
cooking, which is really kind of fascinating. I can
Yeah.
go
I
on
love
forever, so stop me anytime, okay,
No,
please?
I love it. And it's funny because when you look at the Americanized version of Italian cooking that we do here, it's interesting to see the different influences too that get placed into it from, just coming from America.
Mhm.
Using our ingredients and substitutions and the way things have evolved over time. And in my opinion, that's one of my favorite things about cooking is you can take a recipe, a classic recipe, whatever it is, and make it your own. Like you're
Oh,
not bound by the constraints of that recipe. There is nobody saying you have to make it exactly the way, it is written here. You can totally make it your own.
it
And
is an open canvas.
yeah.
It is cooking is an open canvas, and this is pretty much how I started my blog. It's pretty much opening my kitchen refrigerator, say, and what's for dinner tonight?
Hmm.
Because you can create a magnificent dinner with just a few ingredients. You don't have to
Yeah.
go to, like Cordon Bleu or CIA cooking school to put a meal on your table. You really can just let your imagination, your feeling, just go and have fun with it. I mean, a
Hmm.
simple chicken, you can put some tomato in and some carrots and some celery, and boom, you have a kitchen
Hmm.
cacciatore. With the same kitchen, you put a chicken, chicken, you put a little bit of wine and cream and some garlic, and then you have garlic chicken. So it's like,
Yeah.
and it's quite fascinating how you can all play it. But going back to a very important thing, and you said it a second ago, flavors, Italian flavors. There is the Italian cooking and the American cooking. When we first had our first immigrant, the turn of last century, a lot of them landed in the East Coast,
Hmm.
obviously, and then they kind of transcended to the California, the West Coast. They brought with them the basics of what they could find, but a lot of them they could not find a
Hmm.
lot of the ingredient. Therefore, they had to make do with what they found, which created the American cooking. So American Italian cooking is in my book, is a category in itself. It is
Yeah.
not authentic, but it is a category because those people came here and they created something from a memory of what they had and brought it here to
Yeah.
feed and bring their heart back to home. Because I mean, let's face it, a lot of them left very, very early, very young. So that was the only attachment back to the whole country.
Yeah.
Sounds
You
poetic,
know,
doesn't it?
it's funny that you say that because years ago, this is been going way, way back. My father said to me, I think we were talking about like for his birthday, like, and I asked him what he wanted for his birthday, and he's like, the one thing I would love for my birthday is my grandma's brajol, like his
Hmm.
grandmother's brajol recipe. And so, like, I started talking to him about it. I'm like, well, tell me about it. What did it taste like? What flavors do you remember? And so I created a recipe, for what I thought his grandmother's brujol would taste like. No, so for those of you that don't know, brujol is like a flank steak, a really thin beef that you pound out super duper thin. And if you're lucky like me, I have an amazing butcher who will cut it just the way I like it, and it's always perfect. So if you're from northeastern Pennsylvania, head over to Bozak's in Oliphant. They do the brujol meat perfectly. But it's you take that beef and then you can stuff it with all kinds of things. And I think this is where the region comes into play because the one that my father described to me that his grandma made had, it was more bread based with garlic and onion and cheese and parsley. And then you roll it up into like, I do it almost like egg roll style, like you're tucking and rolling, pan sear it, and then it simmers in the sauce. But depending on where you're from in Italy, it could be stuffed with anything from golden raisins to hard-boiled eggs to prosciutto to there's so many different things depending on where you're from. And it's such a great recipe I think, in that respect.
And it is, and Italy is known, like for instance, in that instance, almost all Europe, but Italy is known to use all their locals, excuse me, all local ingredients.
Yeah,
So they have very little transport back and forth between states,
right,
very seldom. I mean, oranges and lemon and mandarin, it's the only thing really we can transport it, the most of it, because North Italy, really, they don't have it because of the weather. But
right.
besides that, everybody uses very local. So a dish like that, you can have it in Milan in a certain way with more with cheese, and then in southern Italy, you can have it with olives and maybe some little bit of anchovies in there, any totally completely
Mhm.
different ingredient. And it is kind of it's really fascinating. It's really fascinating
Yeah.
how it all changes.
And I love the way food can like take you back. So for me, the best compliment I ever got cooking wise was when my father ate the brujol for the first time and he's like, "This is my grandma's." And for me, I'm gonna cry here. That was the biggest compliment I could ever get. So it's truly one of my favorite things. And now we make it every year for his birthday in honor of him because he's passed away. But for me, it's one of my most treasured recipes. And I just love when food can do that, right? It brings people together. It evokes those memories. It's probably Americanized and that's okay, but it had basis from the old country,
Yep.
and it's just that's one of my favorite things about cooking.
Absolutely. For me, as ravioli, my grandmother used to
Mm.
make homemade ravioli with margarine, and my mom with rosemary, and it's amazing. I mean, they're both excellent, but I love the margarine, and every time I sit down and eat that, it's like here's my grandmother in my
Yeah.
room. It's like right there because it's different. Yeah, it evoke the senses and the senses, but also
Yeah.
heart emotions,
Yeah.
and it goes really deep. I always say, I travel the world, as you know, and I always say we're all different and we're all do one thing. We all love food and we all share food. And breaking bread is something that all of us in the world, no matter what difference, where we're from, we do.
Hmm.
Maybe on the floor, maybe on a high-end restaurant, it doesn't matter. That's what we do. So food is really to me a unity. It brings unity in within cultures and within family and within people.
Right. I love that. And it's what the one thing that's so great about what it is that we do.
Mhm.
And one of the reasons I just love to cook. And there were times I'm going to admit there were times, a few years back where I realized I wasn't cooking for me anymore. I was cooking
Mhm.
for the website. I was cooking for Google. I was cooking for everybody else, but not for myself. And I had lost a bit of a spark, I realized. So when I finally realized this, and I don't know why I didn't realize it, but I did. And when I had that aha moment and the light bulb went off, I'm like, you know what? I am cooking for me today. I just made the decision. I put on some good music. I whipped out my Julia Child cookbook and I made coq au vin, and I loved everything about it. It was complicated enough that, like it really brought me into it. And I love like the chopping, I love the searing, I love everything about it. And I was finally cooking for me. And I just love that. And that's what made me happy.
Well, it's so funny because I started opposite. Matter of fact, in a couple of weeks, I've been blogging for 15 years, and I
Wow.
started to cooking for me. I never cooked for Google. I never cooked for the SEO. I never cooked for any of that. I always cooked for me, for my friends, for my family. And it's really kind of fascinating because I always did like, what is good for us? What is what we are eating? And
Hmm.
actually, when I started blogging, it was more of a journal between my son and I, because my husband
Mm,
used to travel so much, what we had, and it was what we did. And of course, you got to
yeah.
take all that out. But that's how it was. 15 years ago is 15 years ago. It's not the same as
Yeah.
now. We didn't have recipe cards, let's face it. So, and we did everything a little differently.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is kind of really funny. I always took it for me. Matter of fact, I have a list of, I used to have parties all the time, and I have all my friends' dietary needs, allergies, all listed out. And one day
Oh.
I had a party, so I had two people were lactose intolerant. One could not have fish. She could not eat fish, and
Mm,
another one could not do anything with vinegar. And it was 20 of us, so five people had different things, and I make sure that everything goes because it's for them, not for me. So
yeah.
it's funny when you do it that way. It's a little differently.
Yeah.
There's
I
another
agree.
appreciation for it too.
I agree.
Although I never started cooking until I was 27. Actually, I burned water to prove a point with my father that I will not be touching a pot and pan. And I even burned the pan that the water was in it because
Oh
I
my
will
goodness.
refuse to cook. And he looked at me and was like, how can you do that? It's just very simple. You see that pan? That's what
Yeah.
happened. If you want me to cook, I could peel potatoes back. That was the extent of my culinary journey when I was growing up. I could
Oh.
eat everything in sight.
Well, I remember, gosh, I was young. Um, I'm gonna say like 4 or 5 years old. I can remember my grandparents lived next door to us, and this was my dad's parents, so the Italian side. So I'd be sleeping over every weekend, and I can remember getting up with my grandma and making ravioli. And I always wanted her recipe. And so when I got a little bit older where I could write things down, like I've always had this interest in cooking, and I started writing it down, but I'm writing, okay, you're putting this many cups of flour and this many eggs. It took me a very long time to realize that her cup of flour was her coffee cup. It wasn't a measuring cup. It was her coffee cup. So my coffee cup is different. A
Yeah.
measuring cup is different. But like, so all the measurements were off, first of all. So the first time I did this on my own, it did not work out well. But I just remember being there in the kitchen with the flour on the table, and she rolled hers out with a broom handle. So she had
Yep.
this wooden broom handle and this big thing, and she'd be rolling out all these ravioli. And that was the one thing we had before every holiday dinner. So you had the ravioli course before you had, your Thanksgiving turkey. So you were full
Absolutely.
before you started, your
Absolutely. Now,
holiday dinner.
ask you something. Did your grandmother just to roll and then she go
Yeah.
push it out and it will just expand it out and then she rolled it back up
Yep.
and then take it again?
Yep.
I'm sure then your grandmother's like my grandmother. They used to put, okay, this is something that I wish I could do. They had those rolling with the holes, right? The rollers with ravioli. But she used to take this filling and put it down on the perfect
Yes.
amount between and
Yep.
do it so fast and you go there. What just happened? And then fold the thing
Yep.
over and take the roller, and the roller knew exactly where the filling was.
Yep.
The filling was exactly where it needed to be. Roll it over and then go with the little
Crimp,
roller.
crimp, crimp, crimp. Yep. I
Done.
remember watching that and helping with that. And my mother has always said, she's like, I always wanted to learn from your grandma how she made her ravioli. And then she goes, I would get up to go over like first thing in the morning. She's like, be here first thing in the morning. She goes, so I would get up first thing in the morning. I'd go over and she'd be like, they're done already. Because
Uh,
her first thing in the morning was like 4 or 5 o'clock, where my
yeah.
mother's first thing in the morning was like 8, 9 o'clock. So it was different time zones there.
Different time zone,
Yeah.
and it's funny because I mean, grandmother, she used to do it. I mean, in fact, she used to cook for 15, 20 people. So
Yeah.
it was like nothing.
Oh,
Making
yeah.
ravioli. And when we used to go to Italy for Christmas vacation, which is, we had actually tortellini also, which is they call them the little belly buttons, but the tortellini. But she made ravioli also because we were there a few days, and she would sit there, and there were literally a good 20 of us, and that's what she did.
Yeah.
So there was, okay, let's do
Oh,
this. And I used to love to eat them raw. And she
yeah.
spanked my fingers. I'm like, they're too good. So she turned
Yeah.
around and got another one. You know.
Yeah. It's fascinating. Like when you think back to that, one of my grandma's recipes that when I got older after my grandmother passed away, that I made one year for Christmas, her recipe for Italian wedding cookies. And I didn't realize now I'm a night owl more than an early bird.
Mhm.
And I started this baking expedition that year around like 9 o'clock at night is when I started baking cookies. And I did not realize at the time, I was young, maybe a teenager, how many cookies 10 cups of flour makes.
Quite a few.
I was rolling out Italian wedding cookies because you have to form them into that little shape
Yes.
for hours. My back hurt and everything. And then once you got them all baked, they all had to be frosted.
Oh
But I'll
gosh.
never forget that. I learned that lesson very quickly on. That was one of my intros into learning how to read a recipe was that look at how much of the ingredients you have to try to determine because it was, it didn't say, servings
Oh yeah.
12. It's recipes from her weren't written like that. It was just the list of ingredients on the paper. And yeah, I learned that really early on.
It's kind of funny because I'm talking about recipes. I have a lot of French cookbooks and Italian cookbooks,
Hmm.
old cookbooks, new cookbooks, so you can see the difference in things of growing. And American cookbooks, obviously, as you can see behind me. And it's really kind of fascinating the approach of cooking. And this can be a total different subject for
Yeah.
later on if you want to. But the approach of cooking, European, Italian, pretty much all Europe, and American way of cooking.
Yeah.
You know, I they put salt and pepper here. You have to literally, and I'm sure you do, have to put, down to the last
Yeah.
like an eighth of an ounce or a sixteenth of an ounce. In Europe, it's like sugar, salt, and pepper to taste.
That's just a known. Like it's even if you don't see it
Ex-
on the recipe, you know when to add it.
Exactly. And the approach is totally different. Here's like a mechanical little thing that we have to feed ourselves. So we have to have this mechanically without thinking. And there is more, it's a total different approach. It's more of a heart approach and more of a taste feel back and forth between you and a recipe.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because my brother bought me a few Italian books, and some of them, and I also have an old Escoffier book. It's literally you read the recipe and the ingredient as you read it, which will drive in
Oh
people
yeah.
crazy if you're not used to it. But that it is like to taste, and people I have people complain. So what is to taste? I say, well, and then considering that northern Italy eats a lot more salty than southern Italy, and actually Italian per se eat a lot more salty than French do.
Right.
So for me, it's really like, which direction do I go? So to taste, because I don't
Yeah.
eat much. It's really kind of fascinating. It's a total different approach on how to do it. One is by feel and one is mechanic.
Yeah. And that's one thing I try to teach my son, right? I've had him cooking with me from a very early age. And I feel like that's one of the things that has helped him become a better eater. Like he'll eat just about everything because he's been in the kitchen. He understands, he's made food and been part of the process. And I think that helps with getting kids to try different foods. But teaching him how to season food and to understand when to season, when you can, add more salt, when to add the pepper, like don't add it in too early and, different things like that. What builds on those flavors, I think has been very helpful for him. He's a pretty good cook for an 18, almost 19-year-old boy. And he's learned a lot of those lessons along the way. And I think that that's one thing that's missing. I don't think kids are in the kitchen enough with their parents and their grandparents learning those recipes and getting a feel for it. I love when my Facebook feed is flooded during the holidays of everybody making their ethnic recipes for the holidays. So I just wish there was more of that.
I do too. And when my son was growing up, I did, I was forced to cook and I hated it. Therefore, I did not do that with my son. However, I knew there were some dishes and he loved to always make it and put them out. So, I mean, my kid would eat a pound of literal broccoli before dinner was done. But what I did, I hired them to help me in the kitchen for the ingredient. Hey, it
Oh,
was a great math exercise because
yes.
I need a quarter of this and a quarter of that. So they will just play with this. Of course, pay attention because you never know, a quarter. But at the same time, it really helped them put the flavors in and understand flavors. And like your son, my son also loves to cook and he cooks for all his friends and
Hmm.
they're having a ball. Matter of fact, for Christmas, we gave him 10 pounds of pasta as a Christmas present.
Oh,
It was a joke. He loved it.
yeah.
Loved it. He thought it was the best thing ever. And a food processor. You requested a food processor. 20 years old requesting a food processor. 21 actually. It's kind of funny. But yeah, it is really a kind of it's nice when they start to cook and just don't
Yeah.
force them, but just have him with you. Have him taste. I think that's what I did a lot with
Yeah.
my son, and have him give me his opinion. Now, for me as a blogger, it was easy because I will actually put his 2 cents of the recipe in it.
Oh,
So I
nice.
got him involved with that when he was very young because he looked at the blog and said, oh, great, we're going to take pictures. When are we going to eat? So I always had them to like, okay, give me your opinion, give me your thought, and then you will put it in. So that kind of helped. But I
Yeah.
think that as a parent, if you ask your kids, what do you like? Do you think then they need something else? I think it really kind of gets them into the cooking process
Hmm.
without cooking, but getting to enjoy the food, the taste, and look
Yeah.
forward to the meal.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the great things about like going back to Italian and American cooking. It's really quite simple, right? They're not these big complicated things that like sometimes I think when you start watching all the cooking shows, they make it more complicated and too complicated than it needs, like more complicated than it needs to be. And like risotto is a great example. So I have a recipe on my site for a basic risotto recipe. It literally takes 18 minutes to make. It's not hard by any stretch, but when you watch all these shows, they make it seem like risotto is like the most difficult thing you could attempt in the kitchen. It's rice. That's all it is a creamy rice. And as now those 18 minutes, you can't walk away. You got to pretty
Oh
much
yeah.
stay present in what you're doing. But it's only 18 minutes and it's so good and it's so comfort and it's so simple.
And listen, rack of lamb was for me. La crème
Yeah.
persillade. I mean, it's one of those things I never did because it's like phew, 30 minutes, actually less than that. 30 minutes you have it on your table and it's
Hmm.
the easiest thing to cook. It is amazing how much, and there was another recipe I just did not too long ago. It was so easy and I just look at it. Why have I never made this? Very easy. I
Yeah.
think because there is a stigma about things. And also we
Yeah.
had a period. There's been a period in the cooking world because you've been doing this for a long time. I have literally started in the 80s cooking. So that's kind of a few decades ago. And I still have all the Bon Appetit magazines. And you can see the transformation. Then it became the fusion cooking. So take a
Hmm.
little bit of this. And that what kind of thing kind of messed it a little bit up because there's too many ingredients. And
Right.
then people start putting too many techniques in it. It's like
Yeah.
home cooking is not, Escoffier. It is not Bocuse. It's not Julia Child. It's just cooking,
Yeah.
simple cooking.
Right.
A little table where you could chop and a stove. So that I think kind of got it a little bit away. But I think the fusion that in my opinion, okay, I mean I don't it's when everything kind of got too much to do, too many flavors, too much, and
Yeah.
people got scared a little bit.
Yeah, and
And
everybody's trying to one up everybody else with in the flavor game and in the technique game.
yeah.
But when you boil it down to the basics, I mean, let's take a grilled cheese sandwich, for example.
Mhm.
If you want to start there, I mean, that's as basic as I think one of the things you can get to make if you want to be cooking on a stove, just make a grilled cheese,
Yeah.
but play around with flavors and start to learn like the textures of different cheeses and how that goes with different herbs or and meats or vegetables that you put in with your grilled cheese or ways to make compound butter. Like it's not
Not
complicated.
complicated. None
No, it's just four or
whatsoever.
five ingredients. It's quick, it's simple, and you can make it delicious just by playing around with different things.
I mean, one of the best steaks is a little bit of oil,
Yeah.
sear it,
Salt
butter,
and pepper.
garlic, salt, pepper, boom, done.
Yeah.
There's no company. I mean, seriously, I think family can have dinner on the table in 30 minutes. A lot of my recipes, they're for 30 minutes parents because I was a working parent with a kid who had this activity, that activity, like a lot of our parents do.
Right.
So I wanted to have that, not the Mickey D dinner, but I wanted to have
Hmm.
the real dinner on my table. And it doesn't have to be extraordinarily crazy. I mean, you can have a little pasta with some vegetable
Yeah.
and some chicken. You can have just a regular chicken with, I mean, it's like you can make so many little things. And while one thing cooks, you can do two sides. You can
Yeah.
even put an ice cream in there for dessert with that cookie for Pete's sake and have a great meal. Then you feel like you're a
Yeah.
king. And it doesn't, it doesn't have to break the bank. And secondly, it doesn't have to take you 3 hours to do it.
Yeah.
Literally, because a lot of time we have things in the pantry, then we don't understand how easy it is to use.
Yeah.
For instance, if on the Italian side, I mean, Italy use pasta for a primo piatto, which is a first plate, and then they always have a second. But if you can use that and you put a little bit of chicken, you can get peas and creams and ham or bacon, whatever, and you
Mhm.
make boom, you make a great plate of pasta with all the stuff is
Mhm.
excellent, and it's just 20 minutes. By the time your pasta finish boiling, which is
Yeah.
12 minutes later, done.
Yeah. It takes longer sometimes to do the pasta than it does to make the pan sauce. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, carbonara is a perfect
Oh, yeah.
example of that.
And that
It
is
takes
so comforting.
exactly, put a little bit of, to saute some zucchini, boom, you got another little plate. You got the mushrooms added in. I mean, it's not complicated. I mean, cooking is not complicated. I think
Hmm.
people we make it complicated. There is a lot of complication, but at the end of the day, it is the easiest thing to do. It just takes a little heart, a little imagination, and have fun with it. Don't be
Yeah.
afraid. I mean, you're in charge.
So I hope we're giving people confidence if you're listening to this, that you're getting some confidence to not be afraid to venture out and try different things because I know we started talking with like Italian and American cooking, and it really is, it's basic, it's fundamental, it's simple ingredients, it's fresh ingredients. And I think that's the other thing too, right? If you're making a recipe that only has a few simple ingredients, make sure they are the best that you can afford. Right. So if you're
Absolutely.
making a tomato sauce with fresh tomatoes, make sure you're getting the best tomatoes you can get, not those mealy store ones. You know, put a little bit of effort in sourcing your ingredients to get the good stuff. Because when there's only a couple ingredients, there's nowhere for those ingredients to hide. So you're gonna taste the true flavor.
And also seasonal. I mean, we're
Yeah.
very fortunate. I mean, where I live, I live in Arizona, so our season is 3 months before the northern part of the
Hmm.
United States. So, while you still under the snow, we already have our tomatoes are coming out. But if you eat seasonal, A,
Yeah.
it doesn't break the bank. Secondly, it's much healthier for you because you don't have them transported from anywhere else,
Yeah.
the world, and they're there. And a lot where you live, you have a lot more farmers, more places where
Hmm.
you can actually go to the farmers market and do things. So it's if you just do that, the simple basic of see what is in season now, purchase those ingredients and cook around it,
Hmm.
you have healthy, delicious, flavorful, because the
Yep.
tomatoes are grown and picked out of the wine or just even on those little towers and you can have at home are
Yeah.
so much better than the one who have been sitting at the on a warehouse and finally put out 3 weeks ago they're being collected.
That's a great tip. So like one of my favorite Italian recipes or Italian American dishes that I make is chicken cacciatore, or as my son used to say when he was little, because I always call it chicken catch in tori because he always like that's the way he would pronounce it. So it always cracks me up. So whenever I make it, that's what I call it. But what I love about that recipe, so it's mostly just it's chicken, it's onions, peppers, garlic. You can easily swap the vegetables around. I mean, like, in addition to the peppers, you could add zucchini, you can add cauliflower, whatever you have, you can make it heartier by adding other things. So don't be afraid to play around because you have the basics of it, right? You have the flavor part of the cacciatore. Just build on that and use what you have. So don't be afraid to play with your recipes at all. Our ancestors didn't. I mean, they were forced to do it when they came over from the old country, right?
Absolutely. And you know, in within Italy, the chicken cacciatore, there is actually five different recipes. And so it depends where you are in Italy. Like in
Yeah.
Rome, for instance, they put bell peppers and
Yeah.
they put artichokes. And then on the south, they put tomatoes because it's fresh. And in the north is totally different. So yes, you can have fun with that. That I think is one of the dishes you can have the most
Hmm.
fun with it, and everything is cacciatore because cacciatore means hunter. The word
Yeah.
cacciatore means hunter. So what are you hunting? I mean, you can kind of play with the words in here, but at the end, it's kind of fun because it's really just like the fowl, which is like the chicken or the whatever else you have,
Yeah.
and you just prepare it that way. You know,
Rabbit. I ate
rabbit.
so
Oh, I love
my
rabbit.
my grandmother fed me so much rabbit when I was a little kid. My
I
mom was
used
like,
to
I
make
couldn't believe.
rabbit. I
Yeah.
used to make rabbit with wine and olives and then with mustard.
Yeah.
And it was to die for my grandmother's recipe. And I have rabbits here all over the place and I can't heat them because I can't touch them. And my family's,
Oh,
you
I've
say
got
the
them
word,
all named in the yard. Yeah, we're not eating the rabbits from my yard. They've
yeah.
all got names.
The coyotes are taking care of the little rabbits more
Oh,
than
yeah.
me.
Yeah.
I have coyotes. So I was like,
Yeah,
ugh.
we do too. But it's yeah, it's fascinating. So like sometimes it just helps to just take a step back, right? And go to pause and stop making things more complicated than they need to be and just go back to the classics, to the basics and get in touch with that part.
Absolutely. Absolutely, you know. And if you do a little search on Italian, like regional
Hmm.
cooking, and then you'll see and you go, huh, I can add this to it. I can add this to it.
Yeah.
And just play with it. You know, I mean, you can, I mean, one of the basic Italian recipes is pasta aglio olio, which is olive oil,
Yeah.
big chili peppers, and garlic. That's it. And that makes one of the best plates of pasta you will
Oh,
ever have.
and
But
I
it
don't know
has to
about
be,
you, Giangi, but there is no such thing as one clove of garlic in my world. For no
well, I have
ever.
actually to say, Italians don't use as much garlic as American think
Yeah,
Italians do.
I do. I use a lot.
As Italian, they really don't. There is quite a few. There is only a few dishes, and the South uses a little bit more. So is
Yeah.
French. The South of France uses a lot more garlic
Yeah.
than, but the rest of us,
Wow.
like, not so much. It's really
Oh,
there's just. And matter of fact, this is one thing that everybody laughs when they come to my house because in Italy, when you make pasta or tomato sauce, okay, you take the whole garlic. You put it in the oil, you saute it until it becomes golden, and then you take the puppy and you toss it because you want the oil essence of the garlic
right.
with the oil, but you don't want the garlic into the tomato sauce or any of the stuff. So in
Okay.
Italy, the garlic, that's how they do it. Just take it because they cook, but it cannot get burned because then it
Right.
turns very bitter. So you
Hmm.
take it, gets nice and golden, and toss it. And you should see my husband's face. He goes, ugh, what did you just do? And I'm like, garbage.
I'd be like, what's this one clove?
Yeah, well, you can put a couple of them, but you don't cook with it. You
Yeah.
just
That's
does it.
that's a subtle flavor. And I've
Mhm.
seen that done in sauce too with onion. And you're putting in, you'll chop the onion in half and put it in the sauce. And then when the sauce is done cooking, you're actually straining the onion out. So
Mhm.
it's not like you have pieces of onion in your sauce. So, I
Same
mean,
thing
these
with
are,
bay leaf. It's the same thing. When you
yeah,
put a lot of the tomato sauce out, like the
yeah,
bolognese, you put a couple of bay leaf, but you take them out
yeah,
because that's just the way it is. It's just it gives that intense layer of flavor because cooking's all layering,
yeah.
and that flavor is there. So it's
Hmm.
like okay, out of here.
Okay, so before we wrap this up, will you share with us what your favorite Italian dish is?
Oh my goodness, I have so many of them. If I had my way, of course, I love. Gosh, depends where I'm at in Italy. I mean,
I
it's
wouldn't
like
be able to answer this question either, so that's why I'm
it's like
asking.
okay. So if I go to Abruzzi, the abbacchio, which is lamb, and they make arrosticini, which is one of those little shish kebab Italian way. It's out of this world. I love all Italian fish. It is just kind of crazy. I love pastas. I think my favorite is carbonara because it's very easy to make. Um, oh gosh, I love artichokes like in Rome, how they do it. I
Mm.
love cannellini on the northern part of Italy. God, you really
I'm
got me there. In
hungry.
every direction, there's so many things. Orecchiette pasta, which
Mm.
is one of my favorite with rabes. It's one of those ravioli, of course. Tortellini, Christmas time. Cannot beat Christmas without tortellini. Let's see. I mean, I can go on and on and on here. My grandmother used to make chima, so is my mom, which is the flank lamb steak. Actually, it's very lamb, and then they cut it and then you stuff it. That's one thing my grandmother used to make. The neck of the chicken, I know it sounds very hard to say, and stuffed it with all this ham and the cheese and the this and the that, and then boil it and then slice it.
Mm.
It's just to die for. What else? What else do I love? Oh, eat fish. Anywhere you are in Italy, because if you go to the coast, the fish is to die for. To
Mm.
die for. I mean, talking about, calamari and le orustichine, and I mean, this, it's like crazy. Pasta alle vongole.
Well, I do hope that you will share some of your favorite recipes from your website with our listeners. I will be sure to put those in the show notes so you can check those out and see some of Giangi's favorites and learn how to make them her Italian American French way.
Actually, no, I'm very categoric. French is French, Italian's and Italians. And to remember, I do have a half of a family is Italian, and trust me, if I do something with Italian with a little bit of French, I never hear the end of
Oh,
it. So yes, I mean
listen.
because the patrimoine, the is the English word I'm looking for. The patronage of Italian cooking is extremely loved and enjoyed, and so is the French one. So the two do not mix at all when it comes like, well, you cannot put that into that because it doesn't do that. So
Oh, well, you had to see when I published on my website my recipe for Swedish meatballs. My mother
mhm.
was the first one. She's like, "You're glad you should be glad your grandmother didn't see that because I'm Norwegians and the Norwegians weren't fans of the Swedes. And if my great grandmother knew I called a Norwegian meatball a Swedish meatball, there would have been a price to pay."
I have a recipe you say not your nonna tortellini,
Yeah.
and which I bought the wonton thing because I was want to do something short. Oh my goodness. The phone rang in within 5 minutes. I dare you. I dare you do this. And I'm like, this is called fast cooking.
I'm improvising.
I'm provided. I have one thing though I want to say to
Yeah.
share. There is a lot of Italian dishes who are not Italian, but they're American dishes who say they're Italian but they're not, and those are kind of funny. But one was the funny that I took everybody for a loop is marinara sauce.
Mm,
Because the real marinara sauce is based with wine, fresh tomato wine. That's it.
that's it.
So I was laughing when the first thing I came here, the first time I ever came to the United States, and somebody made this marinara sauce and they cooked for 3 hours, and I said, "That's not marinara sauce." I felt so bad because I was just fresh off the boat, and all of a sudden there was made this thing, and of course I have no filter, and I was, well, that's definitely not a marinara sauce, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I do?
Way to call it out.
Oh, way to just put my foot in, insert, and walk away.
Well, that is clearly one of those then Italian American hybrid recipes that we've created.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
there is a few, but that's okay. At the end of the day, it's just you have to have fun with it. I mean, if
you
you
do.
take anything out of this, just enjoy reading Italian recipe, and then you can play a little bit outside the box and can
Yeah.
color it and have fun with it. So.
Yeah. That's the best. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Giangi. Why don't you remind our listeners where they can find you online?
You can find me at giangiskitchen.com. Christina will put the link, but it's
Mhm.
Giangis Kitchen. I'm also on Facebook, YouTube. I do a lot of YouTube videos. I'm going to go back to it, as well as Instagram, Twitter. Oh my goodness. All the social media, I'm there. So you'll find me now. Don't be afraid of my little Facebook page. It got hacked, so I had to start all over again. So you can see why do I have only 200 people? Well, it's because I had to start from scratch. But that's where you can find me. But if come to the website and have fun with it, and I'm always a phone call away or an email away if you have any questions. So
And we'll be sure to post all those links in the show notes. But thank you so much for tuning into today's episode of Behind the Recipe. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and picked up a few tips or recipes even to try in your kitchen. And if you love this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your friends. And I'd love to hear from you. So send me your questions, your feedback, your recipe ideas. Just head over to itisakeeper.com/BTR for Behind the Recipe. And until next time, happy cooking. And remember, everything is better when you share it in the kitchen.
Absolutely. Thank you.